I should not be the only librarian here, but I possibly will be. Um, I might be the only one here. That's fine too. Welcome to our first live stream. Librarian live stream Mondays are going to be a thing this semester where I'm hoping we will have one more person join us. There'll be Amanda Rust, our Associate Director for Research and Learning, and there she is. I'm going to add her to the stream. Good afternoon.
Just barely afternoon.
Yeah, just. We are the only ones here, which is exactly what I was expecting for the first time.
Yes.
So we'll have our own sense of fun. We'll talk about the things that we're going to be talking about more often with students, and how I feel like that's a weird thing to have to like recenter your camera when you're not the only person on the screen. It's exciting. So I think we'll be able to watch the comments, but I've been having fun. I got us this little banner, and then
oh yeah,
and then I have
forward
and then I have this thing when we talk about topics, we can show and hide them. I'm getting very in depth with the weeds. So why are we doing this? Well, we know you need help, and if you're watching this after, you might be coming because you have figured out you need help. And we can't always get to you when you need help. So we're trying different ways to connect with you, to connect with our users, to anyone who needs some help with their research. And hopefully, with our limited schedule, but growing numbers, we can start rebuilding our connections with our users, primarily our students. But if you're faculty or staff and need some help, you're always welcome to join the live streams. And I am wearing my Schoolhouse Rocks shirt today because knowledge is power. And like any good Gen Xer, I can probably sing every single one of those songs. So why don't you introduce yourself, Amanda?
Yes. Hi, everyone in the future. It is so nice to see you all. My name's Amanda Rust. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director for Research and Learning at the UMass Lowell Library. And just really excited to be trying out these live streams. We think there's a lot of potential with meeting distance students, with meeting our incredibly busy students and faculty wherever they are. So hopefully this is a lot of fun and works really well.
Yeah, I hope so. So I've broken up the afternoon, the hour we have, into two plans. One is what we'll cover, because I want to cover something every week, something unique and different, but also leaving time for questions, knowing that, we have someone. Hello, Douglas Cooper. If you have questions, put them in the comments. And if you want to remain anonymous in your questions, I will not display it on the screen. I will just read out your questions, but know that the chat can probably see your questions. So my plan is Amanda and I will talk about research and doing research and show you some tips and tricks for article quick search. And then if there are questions, we'll focus on questions till the hour's over. If not, I have extended topics, which will go a little more in depth with using the library specifically, not just all the services we offer. But I wanted to open with a discussion about the difference between searching and researching, because in my experience, it's about control and how much control the searcher has. And Amanda, I'd like to hear what you think about the differences between Google and the databases, but I see them as different buckets almost. That the bucket of Google is like your bathtub. It's really big. It searches a lot. But the bucket of a library database, a library search engine, is very small and specific. And Google, because it is so vast, has learned to make assumptions about what you want, but the databases don't. And I think a lot of students, especially, expect the Google experience to be in our databases, but they have complete control over our databases the way they don't with Google. What do you think?
Yeah, I always think of it too as Google is sort of really broad and like deep in some areas, but our databases, many of them will just go deeper than Google can even find.
Yeah.
And there will be things that are just not available in a Google search, and even the sort of the trace of them is not necessarily available. So I think, yeah, I would. I love the bucket metaphor. I use the buckets too. We're on the bucket train here, and I think that idea of depth is also helpful as well. And I also like what you said about control. For me, at least, that is, it's a some of our databases are like a tight, sort of very deep area where I
Mhm.
have more control. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I picked an example for today so that we could do some sample searches, and I picked the word depression, because I think 2 weeks ago, it was our, like we do on social media, the research mind map on Saturdays, and it had been the one, and if you looked at the mind map, there were things like geographic depressions, like the geology, like a physical depression in our Earth. There was also the Great Depression, so history research. There is our assumed mental health depression research, and then there's financial depressions when we're looking. I mean, even right now, as we are recognizing our recession status, what's gonna tip the scales and put us in a depression? So there's so much built around a word, and when I went into Google and searched, and we have to, of course, wait for Google to my fingers to work. Google assumes we're talking about mental health. It doesn't even suggest, and let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. It doesn't even suggest anything besides the mental health. So if you're doing mental health research, great. This is going to be a wealth of research starting points. But if you're doing something else, you need to use more specific language. But even within depression, there's so much nuance that I think and it was always frustrating for me as an undergraduate, and this was well before we even had Google, um, is knowing how to narrow things down, how to figure out what you wanna write about. And in those days, we had 20-page research papers, which was so very unmanageable. And these days, hopefully, professors aren't asking for that much to be written. Maybe you're getting smaller sections, but you can only tell so much in a certain number of pages. So, what would you suggest students do with Google when they're used to that? And this is what their results are. Oops. Oh, that doesn't let me make it you.
There you go. That's okay, though. I'm leaning forward too. I mean, one of the big questions I always like to ask people is, what stage are they at in their research? Are they looking for something that's just, I don't want to say just an overview, but that's a good overview? Or do you already have several really kind of deep topics, right?
Mhm.
So I think the stage is one. But then two, and this is something that a lot of our students might be already kind of doing consciously or even intuitively, is to start digging into, well, what sources is Google actually showing us, and how
Yeah.
is Google building this database, and where is it actually getting this information, which is probably possibly where you're going next.
This is where I'm going next. I mean, we're looking at things like psychiatry.org. Sometimes it's really good about telling you where it's pulling its research from. So the National Health Services in the UK. Uh, this is a great opportunity to talk about authority and trust, which we'll get to when we talk about this idea of narrowing topics. Uh, and you can see here that the NIMH is a source, but so is the Mayo Clinic. And it's interesting to see that it's pulling nonprofits and government agencies first and foremost. But then we get into Healthline and WebMD, and these are a little, and then of course the ads. So there's a lot of content, and trust can be different. But when you're thinking of narrowing the topic, I pulled up this really fun tool that I love and I think is on some of our libguides. Uh, one of the libraries at the University of Arizona made this interactive mind map tool that allows you to like go through the brainstorm of your topic. So if you start with depression, and this is a really good way to organize your paper also. Think about the 4 points you wanna make, but also the 4 ways you might narrow it down into something more specific. These will give you not just the organization, but the search terms you might use, and I think I'm about to have a dog yell because somebody just pulled up. So, if you hear a dog barking, we are in full lockdown of the house here, clearly. Um, there we go. He is on patrol. He is protecting everyone. So when you use a mind map tool, and I will put the link in the chat in a moment, uh, using it to narrow your focus. So, what type of depression? Was it going to be mental health? Was it going to be financial? Are you looking at causes? Are you looking at specific causes? For me, this is where Google and Wikipedia are at their best. When I know nothing and I need to help, I need that help narrowing down what I want to know. And I'm going to put this link in the chat. And welcome to the few people who have joined us since I did my original introduction. Again, put your questions in the chat and we will answer them. And if you wish to remain anonymous, I won't show them on the screen, but I can show them on the screen. I know what I'm doing. All right, so narrowing your focus will be really helpful. And I think a lot of our students get lost in this. I'm surprised that Wikipedia doesn't show up first. What about you?
Yes, I would agree. Sorry, I'm also in a somewhat noisy office
Yeah.
periodically, so I'm muting and unmuting. But yeah, almost always there's that sort of Wikipedia card. But I wonder where that card to the right, that definition of
Mhm.
depression, is coming from.
Here we go. It's saying something. I like right here. It says, for informational purposes only, consult your local medical authority for advice. Sources, Mayo Clinic and others. Learn more. I'm always going to learn more. And I think that, especially when it comes to medical information, I think Google is started to try to be better about the information they're presenting. But knowing it can't be perfect, it's a search engine. So it's trying to pull from better sources. And I appreciate that they're being transparent about it.
Yeah.
Somebody is backing up. So Google is being pretty transparent about where they're getting some of this information from. But knowing that it's the Mayo Clinic um, gets into this sense of authority and trust and how we decide. Peer review is something that your professors are probably going to mention often in their expectations for papers. They want a peer review paper in your sources. They don't want news, they don't want web pages. Even a nonprofit or a government agency isn't something that's providing you with research. And for me, this is where the difference is. When somebody puts up a web page, they're typically, but not exclusively, trying to provide you with important information that solves an immediate need, that you are looking for help. When somebody is writing an article, especially within the bubble of scholarly research and academia, they're looking to answer a hypothesis of their own or finding a gap in the research that they want to solve. So they're doing those experiments. When you're reading a peer-reviewed paper, you're reading that research. You're looking at the literature review, which is what students do when they write a paper. You find other literature that supports what you're going to do or talks about what's already been done, and you cite those sources. And then they do actual research. They do experiments, they interview people depending on their field. They look at primary sources. We'll get into history and a future live stream. But everybody has their own way of doing research. And then they write the conclusions from those research. projects, the experiments and stuff that they do. So depending on the field, you're going to get really long, detailed papers, or you might get something that's doing a deep dive into some literature and identifying themes if you're doing English. But when they write paper, they defer to, in the literature part, they defer to who came first, and they cite those sources because, and this is where I think some people struggle with authority, it's really easy to trust someone who speaks with confidence in what they're doing. But what do they do? What do they have that backs that up? Who else feels this way? And who are they that they get to feel this way? And that's that citation cookie crumb trail. This is my idea, but here's who else agrees with me, and here's who disagrees with me. But here's why I think this might be different. So we're creating that cookie crumb trail of not just the respect and authority of those who came before us, but to give weight to our perspective and the point we're trying to make. So while we're not going to get too deep into citations today, the idea of the peer review is that this is sort of the creme de la creme of writing. You have an expert who's conducting research, doing experiments, looking at other people's writings. But then there's this editorial process, the review by their peers, by other experts in the field, leading to a better produced paper. And it's not perfect, but it is something that we consider a little more trustworthy than something that might be written by a biased news source. Even when they don't seem biased to you, they're probably still biased in some capacity. But they also don't have to reveal their sources the way a peer-reviewed source paper does. And anybody can throw up a YouTube video. I know, because I throw up YouTube videos all the time. But it's easy to create content. And as someone who speaks with a lot of confidence in her opinion, yeah, it's easy for people to believe someone who has that self-assurance in their thought and their perspective. But Amanda, do you want to talk about some of the problems with peer review?
Sure. I think I've heard people say this some, which I kind of love. It's what is the saying about democracy? It's the worst form of government except for all the others. And so I kind of like when people sort of criticize peer review lovingly, right? Is that in some ways it is one of the best systems we've come up with for sort of identifying advances in scholarship across the disciplines, but it can have flaws. And part of it, I think, is around the incredible amount of extra effort that it takes experts to do. So it's actually really exciting if you think about the professors that are helping you in class. One of the other things that they're doing for scholarship is quite possibly and probably reviewing articles. But within that, there can be the sorts of biases that we see throughout scholarship and throughout the scholarly endeavor, which I think are things that people are trying to address more and more. But peer review, like many kinds of projects, works best when you have a diversity of backgrounds and experiences looking at the same thing. There's sort of a lot of research on how projects and programs in science ends up better when you have that. So I think that is one area where peer review as a system where people are looking at sort of helping the system become better and better.
I agree. And one way that students can help get the best articles for themselves is, for me, focusing on the currency of an article. In some fields like health, currency is sort of an assumption, like you don't go too much farther back than 5 years because health changes like that. Our knowledge of our health changes in a heartbeat. And I think now that we've all lived through a pandemic, we see how quickly this changes. But it happens across other fields. Perspectives change. The idea of diversity has impacted our perspectives on history and the voices we have left out, which changes how we understand ourselves historically, and thus how we write about ourselves historically. Uh, Technology, engineering, computer science, business, these all change. So when we learn new things, it doesn't make all research invalid, but it gives it a little less authority. And I think we see this in really controversial topics where people will quickly discover an article that tells them what they want to hear. And they don't take into consideration that we've learned so much more since this article was published, making it irrelevant because it's completely blown out of the water by what's come up since then and the changes in our world. So when you're doing research in our databases, which again, just search engines, just very complicated, controlling, giving you control search engines, but looking to limit by date is a really good way of getting to the most current and thus probably the most cutting edge research, but it depends on the research you're doing. The other thing I want to add, and Amanda, tell me if you end up disagreeing with this, abundance is not good when you're doing research. You want a very focused, small set of results that talk about what you're looking for versus Google, where we got trillions. Is this trillions? Am I seeing that accurately? 3 trillion results in 0.73 seconds. But how many of us are ever going to look beyond the first page? When you're doing research, you want to look beyond the first page and those database results, but you want to have a reasonable number to look at in your search results. Do you agree or disagree with this?
I agree with it totally. I think particularly when you're starting out, and part of the fun of being a librarian is that we get asked all sorts of different questions all the time. So I'm often starting out with something I don't have a lot of knowledge about. I think particularly when you're starting out, that sort of smaller, more controlled, deeper environment is the most helpful. I think eventually later on, right, at the end of your master's or moving into a PhD, at the end of a long research project, once you've got this sense of, I know what the major studies are, I know what the main vocabulary is, that is when I think, for me at least, Google Scholar, our sort of big, giant sources can start to really shine. But first, for me at least, first I need that grounding and a few really excellent sources that are truly relevant to my topic is better than 10,000 that are kind of irrelevant and possibly not that great.
Yeah, and I think that when you're writing a 5-page paper, you only have so much room. You really want to find what's going to support the points you want to make. So knowing your organization, knowing your search terms, the databases have some really great tools, especially our 2 big companies that we work with, EBSCOhost, which you're all going to see in a second when we get into the article quick search. And then the other company we do a lot of work with is ProQuest. They provide a lot of our business sources. So if you're doing business research, you've probably looked at their databases, and they have a lot of controls to help you focus when you don't know the terminology yet. And again, Wikipedia is very good for learning terminology. Google's good for learning terminology. And when you talk to a librarian, if you find us at a reference desk or you come to live chat or you come here and you ask us questions, or you're in a class and you ask us questions, you're teaching us. When we ask you, what do you mean by that? What is this? What about that? You're teaching us at the same time. So think about what we're learning from you. And that's probably my favorite part of working with students, is that the things I have learned over the years just by chatting with you all about what you're researching is always so enjoyable, because you see the world so very differently than I do. But here we are, our library webpage, always fun. Lots of resources here. We're going to focus on this first search box, article quick search. Right now, this search is primarily our large collection of databases. So if you don't want to pick databases one by one, most of them are in this one big collective search. So you're going to get a ton of results. And again, if I do depression and mental health, I'm going to explain a couple of the things I'm doing here. First, I am putting mental health in quotes. Sometimes this works really well, and this works spectacularly in Google. It tells the search engine this needs to be the phrase mental health, not just 2 words. Sometimes you'll get the 2 words come back, but generally it's pretty good. And between mental health and depression tells the search engine they need to come back. And this works in Google with a plus sign. If you ever put a little plus sign before a word or phrase, Google knows this has to come back in the results. And if you put multiple terms in Google and when you look at the search results underneath, it'll say what it excludes, you can purposefully include things. I start with keyword. Many people start with title, wanting these words to come back in the title, but sometimes they don't. I like to start with keyword. Now, even though I am off campus, there's a great chance to talk about being off campus. I have not been asked to log in from off campus. Ooh, wait, there's a banner. Oh, it's telling me that it stores data. That happens. But since I'm off campus, generally it's talking to the computers on campus to know if I am on or off campus. It knows when I'm on, it knows when I'm off. And if I'm off campus, it'll ask me to log in to my email address. But I already have my email window open. I'm already logged in. So it's not going to ask me again, which is very refreshing. But also, if you are prompted to log in, it's because it doesn't know if you're on campus or not, and it just needs you to confirm you're part of the UMass Lowell community. You pay a lot of money for these. And I say you because you're the ones paying tuition. We make sure that we use your tuition money to get access to these. And thus, we want to make sure that only those who are still in our community are accessing these. This doesn't mean when you're an alumni, you no longer have access or when you're not taking classes. But once you're back on campus, and you can always come to campus anytime you want and sit at a computer or bring your laptop or your tablet and search for yourself. It's the off-campus access we just can't provide. But it knows I'm off campus, and it's also knows I'm logged in. So depression and mental health, which is what Google assumed, I had trillions. Now I have 534,000, which is a huge difference, but I'm never going to look at that many. So how do we get it lower? I call this option, the refine results, my toolbar, my control bar. I'll tell you what a lot of people do. A lot of people will click on full text. Fair. But for me, I know other tools that will help me get the articles, and we'll get there. I do like to click peer reviewed. This means the journal will be peer reviewed. Amanda, do you have any tools that you like on the toolbar?
And you mean all of our options to the left there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably what you were going to get to too, but if you scroll down on our toolbar, I really like to look at the subjects there.
Yeah.
Right. This is where we're at this point. I feel like my first, 5 searches are just all about learning vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the different things? What are the different ways a project like this can go? Sometimes these subjects are really helpful. It depends on the database, but generally, I think they're always worth a look and sort of adding to your mental mind map, like what you showed folks at the beginning.
The nice thing about subject headings, these are what we in libraries call controlled language. So there's 2 types of ways we organize our information in the world. There's the controlled language. This is how we create buckets of things. When you want a book about, I was just reading a book about serial killers in Kansas at the end of the Civil War. And if I wanted to find other books about serial killers, the library organizes around subjects so that I can go into that bucket and find all those books. That's why when you go to a shelf of books, you see all the similar books around it. But then there's natural language. It's the way we talk about things. And very often they are similar, but they are not the same. Oh, the controlled language doesn't change very quickly. I still think we're talking about cars as automobiles, but that's not the natural language. So, and I think in the news years ago, just like a few years ago, there was Congress was up in arms about the way some library controlled language labeled people, and it's because it's out of date. It doesn't change quickly, but natural language does. So the benefit of searching in the search bar is that you get to use your natural language, but when you get the subjects, you get our controlled language, and thus the bucket of everything about those topics. So now we are just for peer reviewed, we almost went to half, still too much, but we have all these subjects now. And there are things here like age and gender and humans. Yes, there's probably research out there about depression in animals. And I think it's primarily around medical testing that they might be doing for drugs and how drugs impact things like mice and rabbits. But also I think some people are interested in are our pets depressed? I think there's probably research about that. And I would be intrigued given that I live with a dog. So you can have age, gender, but then you have these related things like quality of life, mental health services, depressive disorder. You can see how many articles also cover that topic. So this isn't looking at all of them, it's looking from our search results, how many of our search results have these subject headings. So if I click on 2, depression and mental health, to get the articles about these topics, I'll now have a more focused set of results. So I also mentioned currency as the feature. Do we want to go back to 1897? If you're doing history research, maybe this might be an interesting topic for history of mental health, but I like a 5-year date range. And since we're at the beginning of the year, I look to 6 years. So we're 2023, 6 years would be what, 2017, 2018, depending on your mood. Notice it's drops that number again significantly. And what I also love about this toolbar is we can get to more subjects. It'll reset these subjects based on the parameters of the results we're looking at now. So if you wanted to focus on anxiety, you can. There's also geography, which is the location the research is focusing on. I think there was one about Brazil. You might not want Brazil. You might want the US. You might find more nuanced, not just the US, but specific places within the US. Sometimes you'll see specific states, specific countries. Like here's California. You could include Massachusetts in your search and then get something more specific. You can add terms to your search. So you can do geography, language. We can do, let's do female, and it updates. And we can keep going. It's going to keep resetting this number till we get to a manageable set of results. And that could be 0. It is not difficult to get to 0. And here we have a set of results that are peer reviewed from the last 5.5, 6 years about the topics we searched and female. Instead of us trying to figure out how to say woman or women or girls or she, her. I think the one thing that these databases struggle with right now is that gender identity and age issue and how they label it. I haven't seen anything yet with non-binary subject terms in the gender focused content. So You have to do a little bit more work to get those terms in your search, but if you go to advanced search, you'll have multiple boxes. And the nice thing about the multiple boxes is and is between them. So you can switch things. There are times where these databases will suggest things. Here we have mental health or mental illness or mental disorder or psychiatric illness. It's trying to figure out what we want within limits. Or tells the search engine, I'll take any of these. And the same with depression. It's depression or depressive disorder or depressive symptoms or major depressive disorder. It's giving us some suggestions, but it's still keeping you in control. A lot of your limits are here also. Things that might not show up on the search results bar are sometimes here. And every database will have something a little different depending on what you're researching and what parameters it's defined already. And you can see sometimes the results will be different. I don't know about you, Amanda, but for me, sometimes this is the most difficult part of writing a paper. And I think that's because there's so many possible ways it can go. And it makes it overwhelming when you have results. And I see a question from Douglas, but Amanda, what are your thoughts first? And then we'll get to Douglas's question.
Yeah, I think making sure I understand too, I think you're talking about when you feel like you've tried some of these ideas but still have a ton of results, right?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, okay, what do I do next? Yeah. I do. I think if there's one thing I can also get across to folks is feeling lost is actually typical, is quite normal. I feel that way all the time. I'm like, wait, what the student was telling me about cancer research and nursing. Okay, let me think about this again. I need to skim some of these articles or at least the abstracts. So I think that's one thing that I at least hold in my head is, yes, it's very common to feel lost. But also that's where I think going back to the vocabulary and honestly writing things down on a piece of paper, doing that mind mapping again, at least helps me. I like to wave my hands around when I talk. I like to draw on paper. This is where I think once you get a smaller set of results, going into the article abstracts is really, for me, the next best step, right? Is that, okay, I have a smaller set of results. Let me see if I can find one good one. You don't have to find your 5 or your 10 yet. See if you can find the one good one. And then that one is what's going to lead you to additional articles.
There are some databases that do that, the interconnecting between articles really well. I think for health research, Ovid's the one that like you'll see somebody's works cited reference list and it will connect you to those articles. What EBSCOhost does really well is connecting you to other articles around search terms. But Douglas's question is about saving articles and dealing with citations. And citations are an hour within themselves, but I will show you some of these tools. And most of our databases have a feature that allows you to save save your searches, which is really good for upperclassmen and graduate students who are coming back to the same topic over and over. My only advice for graduate students is make your life easier. Figure out what your dissertation or thesis is going to be and always research that for class papers because that'll just do the work for you. But within EBSCO, first, how do you save? You have a feature here. It says sign in up at the top. You can create a free account with them. This is something you have to create on your own. It is not automatically done for you, but it will follow you from university to university. I think I created my account in graduate school maybe 20 years ago, and it's still like I still use it. It still has some of the same systems. You can use your Google account. That is an option. But you can save those searches in your results and then come back to this account over and over again. So you can see now the little folder has things in it. And when you're looking at search results, you can actually see what is over here in my folder. But this little folder icon next to your article allows you to save it. And I think it's just slow today. Yeah, it's still thinking. And I can tell it where I want to go to. And yes, I have an extensive amount of Wikipedia research. The other thing to see those abstracts, the abstracts, if you've decided the title looks good, the subject looks good, don't just download the article. Read the abstract because you only have so much time. So looking at a paragraph or two before you print a full article is always going to save you time. If this isn't the article you want, you'll know before you start printing out the full text. And then to get the citation, there are two ways to manage citations. If this is a quick paper, my suggestion is from this page, the right side toolbar has a cite feature. And it has the major citation formats. So APA, MLA, and Chicago. And it's just taking forever to load today. Here's MLA's 9th edition, which I believe is the current one, Chicago 17th. More Chicago, APA 7th, AMA if you're doing medical research. These do need a proofread, especially for capitalization, especially APA, because APA is really picky about how things get capitalized. But you could copy and paste this to your works cited list. Your other option is to use a citation manager, and that's in the export option. But you can see here, there is an export to bibliographic management software. That's a citation management software. And if you go to export, you can export the content in the format your citation manager needs. Now, there are some really easy ones out there on the web. We can support Zotero to a degree. Some of us know Zotero really well, others of us don't. But the campus will provide you with access to EndNote for free. And we can help you set that up. I suggest that for upperclassmen and graduate students because it's a lot of software to manage for just a quick paper. Amanda, do you have suggestions about citations, things that you can help with?
I really like Zotero. I will say there are some people who have used EndNote for a really long time. EndNote can do really complex, advanced things, but I think 8 times out of 10, Zotero does what you need. And that is, I think, definitely something that I can help with and others in the library can help with. And the other thing, I think a lot like what Sarah said, if you're doing a quick paper, keeping track of all these citations in their own Word document is a great place to start, right? Just saying, what am I looking at? Let me get really solid citations from the database into a Word document. But the other thing I think is really fun that Sarah already kind of touched on about these citation managers is that you'll see your body of work grow over time, and you'll see your expertise start to grow over time, where you'll say, oh yeah, that's the 5 articles I found for this, and that's the other 2 I found for this, and that's the other 3 I found for this, and you can start to see themes appearing. So I feel like that can also really help you see how far you've gone and help you see what your own interests have been. Because honestly, do we remember every citation that we use? I don't think so.
No. My favorite thing to do is because I use EndNote, because I have such an extensive collection, is one of the fun features of EndNote is that you can remove your duplicates. So I tend to do big searches, dump everything into EndNote, and then when I'm ready to start reading, I go through and I just remove duplicates. And I tend to hit the same articles over and over. Yeah. And what people don't realize is, 1, not everything's in a database. 2, we don't have every database. And 3, you're not going to find everything that's in the database just by the nature of the system that we can't. You're going to discover things from other people's bibliographies. The same articles are going to be in multiple databases because the company that publishes the journal has put their journal everywhere to make sure people can find it. But other journals will be only available in this one database and nothing else, especially when you're dealing with the hard sciences and engineering. You guys have very, very specific databases that those publishers want their content in. So you might not ever think to go and find something in a specific database. And then there'll be times where the journal gets included by some weird criteria that they were like, let's give everything this publisher has done to this one database and call it a day. And you'll find like a random business article in a history database. It's weird, but it's a legitimate article in a legitimate journal, and it's just there for some reasons. And then there are the weird things that just increasingly happen where AI bots are taking over. And it's gonna be fascinating to watch how AI bots impact peer review. But we're not gonna wax poetic. We're trying to help you all do the research you need to do. So figuring out the way to manage things and the way that makes sense for you is key. And of course, knowing where to get help. And we're in the last 15 minutes of our live chat for today. So are there any other questions? There are 5 of you here, so if there are more questions, just put them in the chat. And if you want to be anonymous, just say that in your question. I won't put it on the screen, but I will make sure it's answered. A couple things that I wanted to make sure that we talk about briefly, and I'm going to go back to our search results because and notice I didn't hit the back button. Our databases don't like the back button. It's an issue. I get it. We love back buttons, but they don't. Every so often, you're going to hit an article that we don't have access to. And by limiting yourself to the full text only articles, you might lose this one. And of course, I've picked a topic with plenty of full text right here for us to use. But if you ever see something, and I'm not going to go too deep to find it, because I don't think I'm going to. Yep. If you ever see something that says to look for the full text, the find full text feature, click on that because that's going to see if any other database has this article. We have managed to connect all of our databases in some way, and it will try to find that article somewhere else for you. But if we don't have it, we'll still get it for you for free. We have a system called interlibrary loan. And again, you have to create the account for yourself the first time. So do something that you're going to easily remember and a password that you're going to never have to think too difficultly about. Request the article. Our team is relatively fast. We'll get it within a few days, typically. Sometimes if it's like vacation, we don't get it in a few days because, you're on vacation, we're on vacation. But we will get these articles for you for free because we want to make sure you have access to the research. So if you find something in somebody else's works cited list, search to see if we have it. If we don't, make the request. This is the research process. Sometimes it takes a while. It is very often frustrating and it will feel like the most difficult part, but ask us for help. This is one of the many ways we will help you. And I'm going to do the plug for reference and research support. Amanda is got a team of librarians, and I am available to help you with your research. If you go to the library webpage, which is where I'm going to take us, there are multiple ways to get to Ask a Librarian. There are real librarians on the other side of Ask a Librarian. It's not an AI bot. You have your questions, Ask Us tab, which if there is the live chat going on, which is in the evening, someone will be here to respond right away. You can see the hours for live chat. It's not on right now because somebody is actually at the reference desk in both Leiden and O'Leary libraries for you to contact. But you can search our FAQs or you can email and submit a question online. And we're going to respond to it relatively quickly. We are here to help. We want to make sure you are successful. Amanda, this is your team. Do you want to add anything about the service?
There we go. Actually, you've done a great job. We are what's really fun about this year and this semester is that we're here with you on a live stream. We've got some live chat. We're figuring out different reference hours. We're really starting to expand some of the services that we have here in the library. We're trying all different modes and methods and seeing what works and seeing what we can sort of do more of even next fall. And Again, I think Sarah already touched on this, but even if the chat is offline and the live stream is offline, because we have a team, we also use an email kind of ticketing queue. So we have some folks that work these hours, some folks that work these hours, and the email queue really lets us share things back and forth. So sometimes we'll push you to email, but even on email, you can ask to meet with us individually, or sometimes we'll offer that. Sometimes there's a long back and forth over email that's just faster if you have a quick Teams or Zoom meeting. So there's, I think, all different ways to reach us. Even if we start with email, we'll certainly go past that if we need.
Yeah. And we're going to do this again next week. Next week, we're going to focus on health-specific sources so that our nursing students who are now working on big projects right now, this will be your chance to get some help. But if you're an online-only student and this is just not a great time for you, we tried to pick a time where we thought people might be taking a break in their day, but tell us better times for you. We can be flexible also with our topics. We're going to try to do these every Mondays, except for days we're off or days somebody might be on vacation and not available. We have some other events going on. We're trying to get back into campus post-pandemic, especially as the number of librarians grow. So this Thursday, if you're on South Campus in O'Leary Library, you might smell pizza around lunchtime. We're going to be having a panel discussion with some local librarians about the career of being a librarian. This is a job. We get paid really good money sometimes, sometimes not so great money, but it requires an advanced degree. We all have master's degrees if we're librarians, and some of our support staff have their own advanced degrees. So this will be your chance to hear about this as a field, especially if you love searching. Not books. You cannot love books, but you can love information and be a librarian. And then next week, Amanda's team is starting live sessions in the libraries. We have I think we have 2 in O'Leary next week. There'll be information on the library webpage, in our social media, and in UML Today about the specific dates, the times, the locations, the topic of each session, because you can just come in. There will not be pizza at those, though. Those will be pizza free, but pizza on Thursday for the panel discussion. So I hope you will join us. If you have any other questions, we have about 5 more minutes. You can type them in the comments and I will quickly answer them, or submit them to Ask a Librarian, and the librarians on duty will answer them for you because they have just as much knowledge as Amanda and I about what sources we have available. Amanda, anything else you want to add? Anything I've forgotten?
No, that's perfect. I mean, just thanks to everyone for showing up. If you, like Sarah mentioned too, if you do have thoughts about whether this was a good time or other times that would work, go ahead and throw those in the chat too if you have any sort of feedback or other topics you want to see in the future. But other than that, thank you for spending maybe your lunch hour with us. Yeah. So thank you.
5 more people than I expected showed up.
Yes.
I mean, this was our first one. So that 5 people were able to come is very encouraging. It's been so long since we've been able to really work hands-on with our students that we know you need help, and we're gonna do everything we can to start providing more and more of it to get you to graduation and your jobs.
Yes,
so
definitely.
With that, I'm going to stay on a little longer, but I suspect people are going to start dropping off. Other things to notice when you're on the library webpage, just so you know where things are. If you go to Services Overview, This is where you'll find information about borrowing books. We do have physical books. We have course reserves. If you're a student, this will tell you how to access course reserves. And then your interlibrary loan links are here. Graduate students, your thesis and dissertation submission source content is here. If you're in the digital media space and you need supplies, the links here for information about that. If you are a historian and doing history research, I suggest the Center for Lowell History. This is our amazing archive for not just the campus, but the city. And a lot of the content has been digitized. We showcase only a fraction of it on Throwback Thursday on social media, but there's so much here that it's sometimes difficult to find just because there's so much of it, but there are just amazing little gems. This city has so much more than Kerouac going for it. There's just so many amazing people who have lived and worked in this city. And we do have genealogy. We have old exhibits that we've done with the National Park and other groups on campus. We have a featured resource. This is Kay George Roberts, who we featured on social media this week. She is an emeritus professor and an amazing conductor of symphonies and orchestras. So she was part of our community while she was a professor, and now she is an emeritus professor who probably comes back and sees people all the time. So those are just some of the gems on our webpage that people don't always get to see. And with that, I'm going to end today's broadcast because it is time for me to have lunch and cuddle with a puppy while I work on other projects. But feel free to email us. We are on if you go back to the library webpage, you can find email addresses for Amanda and I in the About the Library section, where there is a staff list and you can find out about how to contact as many of the librarians and staff members as you need. We're all happy to help or direct you to the person you need. So with that, I hope to see you next week for our health research live stream. Submit your questions on Ask a Librarian and have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.